So in this video, we're going to take a look at how to display formatted output. So essentially what we're going to be doing is seeing how we can take the output that we print out to the console and format that in a specific way. Probably one of the particular things you've noticed is whenever we print out our decimal numbers, they're typically printed to something like 15 digits, particularly in cases where we don't necessarily want that. That'll be a pretty major use case for this formatting. But in addition to that, we're also going to take a look at a few other things we can do to further format our output. So we saw the print and printline methods in the previous chapter. In addition to these, there's also going to be the Printf method. So the Printf method allows you to format the output of a print statement. And the way that this is going to look, so the format or the structure of the Printf statement is going to be system.out.printf, so still getting it from the system class, just like print and printline. And then inside of the parentheses, we're going to have two different parts to this. So the first part is going to be the format string with one or more format specifiers. These are going to be placeholders that will indicate where a formatted variable or value will need to be inserted or placed into the string. And then the second is going to be one or more additional arguments. These will be either variables or values that correspond to a particular format specifier somewhere in that format string. So to actually give you a little example so you can kind of understand what it is that I'm talking about, we can take a look at this little piece of code that we have right here. So we've got this double sales that is initially going to be set to 12345.67. And then we have our printf, so system.out.printf, and then inside of the parentheses we can see two different parts to it. So in the first part we're saying our sales are, and then we have our $, and then we see the %f, so that's going to be one of our format specifiers, and then we have the rest of the sentence for the day, or period, and then at the very end of it we're going to include a new line character, since printf is going to be just like print in that we don't have a new line character at the end of it, so we need to go ahead and put that in ourselves. And then after our string, we're going to have a comma, and then we're going to have another item, so another variable in this case, that we're putting into that pair of parentheses. And so right here we're going to put in sales, and so sales is going to be part of that argument list. This is going to be the thing that will eventually replace the %f that we see inside of our string that we're trying to format. So when we actually get the output, display that to the console, you're going to see our sales are, or $, and then you're going to see the number actually print out for sales. One thing that you'll notice about it when we do this, because I'm only using %f, is that you're going to see this 0.670000, and then the rest of the sentence for the day. So to kind of break down the different parts here, the %f included in our format string, that's going to be an example of a format specifier. The % character indicates the start of a format specifier. So this is essentially like the / character, particularly for formatted strings. So whenever you're using the printf method, you're going to use the % as a sort of escape character, saying that this is going to be the part where we're going to start specifying one of these placeholders. In this particular case, since we're doing %f, the f for this particular specifier represents floating point numbers. So this is how we can say what it is precisely, as far as the data type is concerned, what it is precisely that we're going to be formatting. So the f is going to represent floating point numbers. This is a format specifier that can be replaced with either a float or a double. So you can see right here, sales is of type double. We did that in the declaration for it. So let's go ahead and actually put this together. So we'll just do these first two lines inside of our program, and then we'll slowly start to add a little bit more to this as we take a look at some of the other rules related to the printf method. So go ahead and minimize this. Come over to NetBeans. Go ahead and create a new project. So go ahead and make ourselves a new Java application. Click Next. So for this one, we'll go ahead and call this one Formatted Output. So we're going to be using this program to create a few different outputs with some formatting being applied to them. Go ahead and click Finish. So we'll go ahead and remove the extra comments that we're not going to need. Just go ahead and get those out of there. adjust the style a little bit. And then inside of the main method, we'll go ahead and declare our variable. It's going to be sales. So we'll make sure that it is of type double. And then we're going to assign to it, so in this case, initialize to it, that value 12,345.67. We'll close that off with a semicolon. And then on the next line, we're going to go ahead and put in our printf method. So we're going to use system.out.printf. And inside of here, we have two things. The first is going to be our string for our format string. And then the next thing, comma separation, is going to be the sales that we want to put into it. So for this one, we're going to say our sales are, and then our $, and then the %f for the format specifier, and say for the day, period. And then we have a comma outside of the string, so this is going to be the comma separator for the two different values that we want to put in. And then we'll go ahead and put sales on the next side. We'll go ahead and save that. And then if we go ahead and run this, we can see right here we've got our output. And the one last thing I need to include is our new line character. So make sure we have our \n on the end of that. And then when we run it, we can go ahead and see we've got our statement here. Our sales are this 12,345.67 for the day. And then we've got our build successful on the next line, so we'll keep them kind of separated with that new line character. So right now we see that we get this extra set of zeros. So in a moment, I'll kind of talk a little bit about what it is that formatted strings do with their floating point values and how we can go about fixing this, and also how to improve upon the formatting of all of our numbers that have some kind of fractional portion like this. So coming back over here, so let's go ahead and elaborate a little bit more on the structure of our format specifiers. So each format specifier is going to have the following parts. The parts that have these little brackets around them are going to be the optional parts. So you can see right here, there are two parts that are not optional. So two parts you have to have. The very first one, that %, you always need this to indicate that you are that this is where you're going to be placing one of your format specifiers. And then also the conversion on the very end. We always need to specify what the data type is that we're trying to convert. So going through this list, so we got a %, all format specifiers lead with a %. This is required. Our flags, so we're going to have one or more optional flags about how to format a value. So keep in mind that I mentioned before that if you have a Boolean value or Boolean variable of some kind, another way that you can describe that is as a flag. So that naming convention kind of comes from this situation right here, where whenever you place one of these flags into there, it's kind of like you're trying to say that a particular condition is true, so you want to apply some additional formatting to it, and excluding those flags is like saying that that's false, so you don't want to apply that formatting. We also have the width, so this is going to specify the minimum field width for a value. This will be pretty useful in situations where you need to maintain a particular size for each one of a set of values. I'll see a little bit more about that in a moment. We also have the precision field, and it's going to be led with a dot, so you have dot precision. This is going to specify the number of decimal places to round a floating point value to. And then finally we have our conversion, so we have some conversion character such as the F that we saw for floating point numbers. So the first thing we'll start with is going to be the conversion character. So there are three important conversion characters to discuss here. The three primary ones that we want to focus on are going to be F, D, and S. So the F that we've already seen, that's used for floating point numbers, so that's good for the float or double data type. We've seen this in our previous example. The D is going to be used for decimal integers, so this is going to be for anything that is in the integer data types. That would include our byte, short, int, and long. Decimal in this particular context doesn't mean like the decimal or fractional portion that you might be accustomed to seeing. In this context, decimal is meant to mean base 10. So when we say this, basically it means that we're saying a base 10 integer, or since most numbering systems focus on base 10, you basically would just say that it's for integers. And then finally we have the S, and that's going to be used for strings, so that's for anything that is the string data type. Some additional characters that we can include besides these three are going to be the previous escape sequences when we were using the print and print line. So an example of this, we see the \n. We can actually replace that with %n to specify a new line character in a format string. So I'm actually going to make one little change to this program that we have right here. So I created this \n for a new line character. A better way to do this is to actually do %n. So this would be the more correct way to do this, even if both of these can achieve essentially the same output. So if we run this again, we can still see we get the same output. We're just doing it in a way that is a bit more proper, or a bit more formalized. Alright, so the next field we'll focus on is going to be the precision field. This is exclusively used with floating point numbers because of the fact that floating point numbers are the only thing that have this fractional portion for rounding purposes. So this field is used to specify what decimal place that we want to round a number to. So to give you another example of this, we're going to add a few more digits to our sales. So we're going to do the same 12345.67 that we had. We're also going to include a 52 in the rest of that fractional portion. And we're going to add an extra little 0.2 in front of the conversion character, so kind of between the leading % sign and the conversion character. And when we do this, this is going to specify that we want to round our value, which is sales in this case, to 2 decimal places when we print it to the console. So let's actually take a look at that. So go ahead and minimize this. We'll come over here. So we've got our value right here. We're going to go ahead and add a few extra decimal places to it. And then right here, inside of our format specifier, where we're getting the sales, we have %f. We want to go ahead and put in a 0.2 right there. We'll go ahead and save that. And so now if we run this, instead of giving us this value we have right here, and also instead of giving us this output we saw previously, if we go ahead and run this, it's just going to give us the 12345.68. So in this case, it rounded this 6752 up to just 68. And you'll also notice that now when I'm doing this, we don't see those extra zeros, those trailing zeros. And the reason for this is that if we don't include this precision field, so we just do something like this, by default, whenever we print a floating point number to the console in a formatted string like this, it will always be to 6 decimal places. So that's going to be the default behavior. But as long as we include this precision field, it will instead print to the number of decimal places that we specify here. So in this case now it will be to 2 decimal places. The next field we'll look at is going to be the minimum width field. This is going to be used to specify the minimum space that a value must occupy. White space is going to be used if the value's length, the number of characters, is smaller than this minimum width. So a possible use case for the minimum width field is to keep values aligned in some table of data. So maybe if you had a set of data, a set of numbers, each one in its own row, and you wanted to keep them aligned against maybe the edge of a specific column, you could go ahead and use the minimum width field to make sure that they're all kind of aligned properly. So let's go ahead and minimize this. And rather than going through a kind of elaborate example like that, I'm going to go ahead and just do it with this one so we can see the extra space that it will put between the number and this $sign that's right in front of it. So let's look at the example we have right here. So we've got our %.2f where we're getting sales. So if we look down here at the output that we're going to get, we can count out the number of characters to see how much bigger we would need to make our value so that we can actually start seeing some white space. So right here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So those first 5 numbers make up 5 of our characters. This decimal place makes up the 6th character, and then the 2 decimal places, or the two digits of our fractional portion, are going to make up the 7th and 8th place. So altogether this thing has a width of 8. So if we go ahead and specify something like, say, 9, then because this value, the sequence of characters that make up this number is smaller than our minimum width, we're going to go ahead and apply some white space, some leading white space, to kind of pad out that extra little bit so that it maintains that minimum width. So if we run this, you're going to see now that we have this one extra character right here of white space. And if we do this again, say we bump this up to 10, we can save that, it will continue to add more and more white space. So we run it again, we now have 2, so we have 1, 2. So we have those 2 extra spaces right there. And so this white space is basically the equivalent of just pushing the space bar, in this case pushing it 2 times to add out, to pad it out just that extra little bit. So the next thing we'll look at is going to be the different flags that we can work with. So this is just going to be a pretty small subset of some of the flags we can work with. There are going to be many others besides these, but we'll focus on these 3 since they are at least pretty interesting. So going through these couple of examples, we've got the comma flag. So we can just do an extra little comma. This is going to specify a comma separator for numeric values. So we'd see something like 1,000 or 1,000,000. So like for every 3 digits that we have, we'll add a comma and then move to the next 3. So we can actually add that to our example that we have right here. So we'll go ahead and put a comma right here at the very beginning. Go ahead and save that. And if we go ahead and run this again, we can now see that we've got a comma. And because we have this comma now, that's going to increase the number of characters. So we kept the width as 10, but now with this extra character, the length right here is going to be 9, so we only have 1 extra white space in front of it. The next flag that we have to work with is going to be the 0 flag. So this is going to indicate that a number should be padded with leading zeros instead of using white space. So ideally you should be using this flag in combination with the minimum width field. So if we want to go ahead and specify this as well, we can go ahead and insert that right around here. I will note now that the order of the flags doesn't really matter. So you could do something like 0, comma, and then the rest of it, or you can do comma, 0, and then the rest of it. Either one of these combinations will work. So if we go ahead and run this, we're now going to see this leading 0 right here. And then finally, getting into the last flag that we'll look at here, still dealing with the minimum width field, content, so that includes our strings or numbers, is pushed to the right whenever we apply some kind of minimum width. So you saw this before, the number for sales that was printing to the console was being pushed to the right, and the leading white space was at the left of it. So we can actually include another flag, which is going to be this minus character, to specify left justification. So this is just going to invert that process, where basically now the number is going to be pushed to the left, and then all the white space would come after it. So if we go ahead and minimize this, so we can go ahead and do that right here. I'm going to remove the 0 flag to do this, and just put in the minus. Go ahead and save that. We'll go ahead and run it. And so now it's going to push it to the left, and now we've got an extra space right here. And then, of course, we have the space that leads into the word for. So the reason that I removed the 0 flag right here is because of the fact that this 0 flag is very specifically meant for leading zeros. And it's actually already giving me a warning because of the fact that I did this, trying to tell me that my format string is malformed, meaning that I've done something that is not legal inside of it. So if I try to run this, it's just going to give me this error, and this error is going to be related to the fact that I can't do that. So it gives me something like this illegal format flags exception, telling me that the minus and the 0, or at least trying to tell me that the minus and the 0, that combination, I can't do that because this is specifically just for leading zeros. So we'll go ahead and remove that and save it. And then if we run it, we can go ahead and get our expected output. Alright, so to start to kind of finish up on formatted output, we can also use the %s character to insert a string into our format string. In addition to this, I'll also go ahead and do a quick example with %d so we can see both of those. So we've seen quite a few examples, mostly relying on %f. So if we go ahead and take a look at some of these other ones, let's say that we go ahead and modify this statement right here. So we've got our sales. Let's go ahead and add in another one, which is going to be int days. Let's say this is going to be equal to something like, let's say 30, so about a month. And with this days, we'll go ahead and do, let's say that our sales are something for the last, and then right here, I'm going to go ahead and put in my format specifier for days. So because days is of type int, I need to go ahead and use %d for this. And then we're also going to go ahead and change this to be plural. So we can basically say now this is going to be our sales are blank for the last blank days. And it's giving me a warning now because the number of format specifiers I have doesn't match the number of arguments. So I need to go ahead and fix that as well. So as far as the arguments list goes, we can have one or more different variables or values. It's all going to be a comma separated list. So just do another comma and then put days. And the way this is going to work when it's checking to see what to place where is the order that I've placed my format specifiers inside of this string, that will need to match the order of my variables in this argument list. So sales is the first argument. That's going to go with the first format specifier. Days is the second argument in my argument list. So that needs to match up with the second format specifier. And of course, this is also excluding things like %n, where this doesn't require a variable of some kind. This is just literally translated to a new line character. So we don't have to worry too much about that. So we'll go ahead and save this. And if we go ahead and run this now, we'll still get sales with all of the formatting that we're applying to it. And we'll also see the %d, which is going to be for days, which has 30 in it. So run that. And we can see now we've got our sales are $12,345.68 for the last 30 days. So that shows it with %d. In addition to this, we can also deal with our %s. Let's take a look at the example we had here. So we use %s to insert one string into the format string. So you might be wondering, why would you insert one string into another? Why not just make it one single string literal? Where this becomes more useful is whenever you need to add several format specifiers to a single format string. So you might have noticed a few cases where we are using string concatenation to combine different parts together along with some variables. So typically whenever you start adding like 3 or more variables to a single string using string concatenation, you notice that it becomes kind of clunky and sort of awkward to work with. In cases like that, that's a pretty good reason to go ahead and just use printf instead. It helps to kind of simplify the way that looks to the screen. So in this particular case, we'll just go ahead and do a very simple example. So we've got one string with your name, or in this case just a name. So we're going to be using the name Ringo, and we're going to go ahead and put that into the larger string your name is, and then we've got our %s, so it's going to be for name, and then for the \n we'll go ahead and do that as %n. So let's go ahead and put this together. So minimize this, come over here. So we'll go ahead and create our string and our print statement right here. So we're going to say string name is equal to Ringo, and then just underneath this we'll go ahead and put together our printf statement. So we're going to do system.out.printf, and right here we're going to create our string. So this is going to be our format string. We'll say your name is, and we've got our %s. That's going to be for the name, and close that off with a semicolon. And then back over here, we can go ahead and do our period, and we'll do the new line character with %n. So go ahead and save that. And then if we go ahead and run this, we'll see that this %s is going to be replaced with name, which holds this value Ringo. So we'll see that right here. Your name is Ringo. So in addition to the printf method, there's also going to be the string.format. So there's going to be the format method from the string class, which basically achieves the same thing, but instead of printing it to the console, it just creates a new string that you can then store into maybe some other string variable. So it's going to take the same sorts of values as the printf method. It's still going to have a format string and then some argument list for the different things that you want to put inside of that format string. So in this case, the format method is going to return a string so that you can then go ahead and assign that to some variable. So we can see an example right here. We have declared a string that we're calling formatted string, and this is going to be equal to, or we're going to assign to it, string.format, and then whatever our format string is, plus our argument list. So we'll go ahead and put this together as well. I'm going to use the same example that we just did, but I'll do it as I'll do it using the string.format method. So we'll go ahead and minimize this, come over here. So we'll come down just a little bit, and right here we'll go ahead and create a string. We'll call it formatted string. This is going to be equal to string.format. And then inside of here we want to put in our string that we're trying to format. So we'll go ahead and use the same one we had right here. We'll say your name is, and then we still have our placeholder and our new line character, and then we'll also put in the name right there. I'm going to save that. And so the end result here is we're going to get from the format method, we're going to end up with the string your name is Ringo, and we're going to take that string and assign that to this formatted string that we have right here. So then if we wanted to, we could go ahead and just print out the formatted string. So since I went ahead and put the %n right there, we could actually just use the print method for this. So we're going to do system.out.print, and then we'll put in our formatted string. Go ahead and save that. And for this one, we'll go ahead and see the exact same output. So we'll still see your name is Ringo. So we'll go ahead and run this, and we see it print out to the screen twice, once for line 12, and then again for line 15. Alright, so at this point, this is going to wrap up everything with formatted output, relying on things like printf or string.format. In the next video, we're going to finish up on chapter 3 by taking a look at regular expressions.